go ahead and join me down on your mat and welcome. We are going to begin with just a quick introduction to Pilates. So if you're completely brand new and you didn't even know how to say the word, then you've just learned it. It's Pilates, and it's the last name of Joseph Pilates, who we owe the credit of the Pilates method. And it's based on these principles that include concentration and control and center, focus, breathing, and precision. And then it's all kind of mind-body movement. And we are going to kind of take some of the fundamentals and explore them a bit more in this 4-part series that I'm producing right now. And just something that I think is kind of interesting, like anything, you can have a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum would maybe be very classical Pilates, and that's an instructor who chooses to practice Pilates and teach the method in a way where the exercises are much like they were originally, in the same order, without a lot of adaptation and variety, and that absolutely has a place. And then someone like myself, who is much more on the contemporary side of the Pilates methodology, where we just take those underlying concepts that I mentioned and we use those in a creative way to inform the way that we sequence movement patterns together. And so that happens to be what I enjoy, and the way that I bring my Pilates influence to you in mindful movement videos. So often there's questions about how Pilates and yoga are similar or different. And I'll first of all say that there are a lot of similarities. They're both mind-body centered movement practices, but there's also differences. So I would say in Pilates, we maybe are, and it's not necessarily true, so it's hard to say exactly, but in Pilates, we tend to move through things, whereas maybe in an asana practice, in a yoga practice, you would hold things a little bit longer. So that could be one difference. Another difference is that there's always a strong emphasis placed on connection to your core in Pilates, and that could be the case in yoga. It's really dependent on the instructor, so it's hard to say for certain, but it just kind of gives you a little bit of insight into maybe what some of the differences may be, if that's a question that you had. And let's see, so breath, one thing that's very similar is the emphasis on breath work and the connection to your breath and how that informs the movement patterns. So we are going to begin with that kind of fundamental to start with. And in a Pilates breathing pattern, we typically tend to focus our attention on our ribs and sending our breath to our ribs. And that's not to say that your diaphragm isn't moving or that your belly's not inflating. It just happens to be that that's where we choose to place our attention. And so we are going to explore that a little bit right now. So go ahead and just bring one hand up. You can be my mirror image, and you can either wrap it or you can place it directly on the side, depending on what feels better to you today. And then you're just going to see if you can find a gentle inhale, and you're going to expand your ribs into your hand. So just allow your system to kind of settle and calm down. And then when you're ready, take a very gentle inhale through your nose. And exhale again through your nose. And I'll just keep breathing, and I'll just be a clear example for you, and I want you to just watch and then explore it on your own body. So watching for my ribs really getting wide and then hugging back towards midline, towards my spine. So maybe I'll show it to you like this, and I'll just try to breathe evenly on both sides. And then you can just explore that on your own for a second. So most of us tend to breathe more on one side than the other. It's a mild form of scoliosis. So even if you don't have full-blown, like diagnosed scoliosis, which is kind of extreme curvature in the spine, in a kind of asymmetrical way, then just if you're kind of generally weak or a little imbalanced, as almost all of us are, then you're going to tend to have one lung that gets a little bit more full of a breath and one lung that gets not quite as much. So that's something that you can explore as well. You can pause me and explore that if you would like, or you can just consider that a little nugget, an idea for you to explore after we finish the video here. So the other thing that I'll just note about the breath is that if in doubt, your job is just to breathe calmly and to not get hyperfixated or stressed out on the breath, because as soon as you start to get stressed out and like hyperfixated on the breathing pattern, then it kind of loses the whole essence, which is a calming, it's supposed to be a calming factor. So if you're not quite there yet and you don't find that breath to be calming or centering, then you can practice it and it can come together with your practice as it's ready. But for now, you can just focus on some just calm breathing in a way that works for you. So the next thing that I just wanted to kind of address is a couple of terms that you will hear often in Pilates lingo. So one is referring to kind of maybe like the entire length of your spine. And so I consider the entire length of your spine from, go ahead and touch the crown of your head. So from the very tip of your head all the way down to the very base of your tailbone. So that entire distance is your spine. And that's one way that we will organize our movement patterns, is from our spine. And then another anatomical cue that can be really helpful if you're not familiar with it is the term your sitting bones. And so your sitting bones are like deep in your bum tissue. It's the bony part of the bottom of your pelvic bones. So you can literally just kind of dig in. I know it's a little bit silly, but go ahead and dig in and see if you can find your sitting bones. If you can't find them in that position, then come down and then they might shoot out a little bit more, and just see if you can find them in that position. So identify where they're at so that when either myself or another instructor refers to them, you have good awareness of where they're at in your body. And then the other term that we often use is something called neutral pelvis. And that's just kind of the idea of your pelvis being aligned. So this kind of part of your body down here being aligned in relationship to your spine in a way that's not either tucked under or overly extended. So in this position, if I were to just show you and you come along with me for this journey, if you make a triangle with your thumbs and your index fingers and you place it on your lower belly, maybe if you place your thumbs on your belly button and your fingertips facing down towards your pubic bone, that's, and of course, depending on how much abdominal fat you have, there's that factor to take into account as well. But in this relationship to gravity where you're either kneeling or standing, neutral pelvis would kind of be vertically aligned. It wouldn't be you know, your fingertips wouldn't be jutting out forward, and nor would your thumbs be forward of your fingertips. So it would just kind of be aligned in this vertical plane. And then when we change our relationships to gravity, when we start exploring this in just a moment here, that might make a little bit more sense. So it's okay if this feels a little bit overwhelming. As I start to move with you, it will settle into place. I just want your brain to have just a little bit of an introduction to the terms if they're brand new to you. So then the other thing that I just feel like is really important, and I think is maybe more on the contemporary side of Pilates, I would say, is your foot and the shape of your foot. So that we're going to call it a domed foot. So your foot connection into the floor in various positions is really important for whole body connections and just good body organization. And it's also really important because if we do something on the mat that induces change in your body, the whole point is to be able to get up and take that with you into the real world. So I feel like I haven't done my job and you haven't done your job if together we can't create a scenario where what you do on the mat, you can't physically stand up and walk away with it as you walk to the train, for example, or go to get your groceries. So a domed foot is kind of like a bird on a perch foot. It's a combination between a flexed foot and a pointed foot. So I'll first of all just show you without bearing weight on it. So the dome of the foot is like that. So if I was going to be in a totally flexed foot, it would be there. And if I was going to be in a pointed foot, like a ballet or a dance foot, it would be there. But we're just going to take those two and kind of combine them in that zone right there. And then you can see that if my toe's getting a little bit of a Charlie horse in it. So if I take that dome foot and then place it on my mat, that I have a beautiful arch to my foot, and my heel is connected down, and also the outside of my foot underneath my big toe joint and my big toe. And so it's our job to kind of maintain awareness of what our foot is doing. Most of us tend to have patternings where I'll show you standing, where we tend to be either kind of rolled in or maybe standing more on the outside of one foot. And then so that's the domed foot, but then we can also call alignment in the lower body neutral alignment. So this would not be neutral alignment. Neutral alignment in the lower body would be kind of your feet right underneath your hip sockets that are deep inside there, and then your kneecaps aligned with that, and then your middle toes organized with that as well. So that would be neutral alignment. And then if you can get neutral alignment organized with the dome of your foot, then that's pretty awesome. You have a lot working in your favor, and it's always in the direction of ease. We never want to force anything into place. So if you've been really tight, like in a kind of maybe rotated out pattern for a while, it's not ever the point to like rigidly force yourself into neutral. It's just a mental note to yourself that we are working in that direction, and that's ultimately the end goal for healthy posture and longevity in the body and just good vitality. So with that said, we are going to come down to the mat on our backs, and you may just want to watch first for a second. So I'm going to introduce something to you that may seem so basic that it's silly, but if you have been kind of disorganized and detached in your body for a while, then it's not stupid or silly. Even if you have good body organization typically and you're physically fit, it's always good to have a home base to ground back to. And so this home base is called constructive rest position. And it illustrates beautifully how even lying on our back with our knees bent requires good body organization and awareness and presence. So it's not a position that's nothing. It actually requires you to be present in your body, to lay on your back with your knees bent cleanly in a restorative manner. So if you don't have some support for your head, like a small hand towel, you can pause me for a moment and go ahead and grab that. And then just watch for a moment as I come down to the ground. So just very gently organize yourself onto your back. Oh, we have a mic that needs to be moved. Okay, so here I am down here with my head supported, and feel free to adjust your head support as need be. So the way that you know that you will need support for your head is if you lay down on your back and you feel like, I can't move. You feel tight through your neck, through your shoulders, through your upper back, or maybe even your lower back can be a place that it resonates. So organize some head support for yourself. And then I'm just going to point out neutral, a few things in this position. So you can see that my feet are in neutral alignment in relationship to the rest of my body. My hips, my knees, and the center of my toes are all facing in the same direction. And then I have a nice foot dome, like a kind of bird on a perch foot. So the arches of my feet are maintained and the tripod of my foot is connected into the mat. And that might just be enough for you to digest for a moment. And so most of us in this relationship to gravity, when we lie down, we aren't really in a neutral pelvis. If you just lay here and do nothing, then your lower back will collapse into the floor. That's the direction that gravity is telling it to go. So it does require some gentle activity in your body and good presence to come into neutral. So you can take your hands and just place them on your lower tummy and use them for a little bit of feedback to see if you even have good awareness of where you tend to end up in this position. So it could be that you have kind of some good tone and some good homeostasis, and when you come to neutral here. If not, just recognize that even though it's called a rest position, it might feel like some work to get yourself into neutral alignment here. So in neutral alignment, most of us will have a little bit of a cubby hole, a little bit of a space for our lower back. And that's healthy. It's good to have some natural lumbar curve. And then once that's kind of settled and the domes of your feet have settled into the ground and you feel like your pelvis is kind of neutral and your head is supported, then you can decide if you want to leave your hands there, if you want to take them away somewhere. Today it feels like my body wants my arms to be wide and palms up for some reason. So just kind of honor whatever feels right with your arms. And then we are going to shift our attention to our 3 main body weights and the entire length of our spine. So again, just sense a connection between the very tippy top of your head and the very, very tip of your tailbone. And see if you can find all the connections in between those 2 points. Just kind of organizing, allowing your vertebrae to organize and your pelvis to become even more neutral. And then we're going to see if we can just sense the weight of our 3 main body weights. So see if you can feel the weight of your head. And if you can't feel it, okay, that's fine. That's good information as well. So just know that if you can't feel the weight of it, then that means that there's probably some restrictions, some tightness that you may or may not have been aware of. And that's all the more reason to keep joining me weekly for some mindful movement videos. And then see if you can sense the weight of your ribs. And see if just that registers to your brain at all. And then see if you can feel the weight of your pelvis. So those are our three main body weights: our head, our ribs, and our pelvis. And you don't have to fix anything, just see if you can feel how they're weighted into the ground. And then when you're ready, you can just join me, and we're going to add in a little bit of a breathing pattern to that. So now go ahead and bring your hands back from wherever they've landed and just take them onto the sides of your ribs. And see if you can take a gentle inhale and inflate the sides of your ribs away from your spine. And then exhale. You can actually sigh it out through your mouth if you prefer, or funnel it out through your nose. I'm fine with either. As your ribs hug and wrap in towards your spine. Again, take a breath in and allow the ribs to widen. And exhale and allow the ribs to soften and to just gently hug closer to the spine. And one more time, just breathing in on your own time, breathing nice and wide into your ribs. And exhale either through the nose or sighing it all out through the mouth to wrap and hug those ribs in towards your spine, hugging all of your organs, hugging your lungs. And then you can just rest. So this is constructive rest position. It's a good way to regain some organization in your body if you have tension patterns that have developed. And in part 2, we'll just take this idea of neutral pelvis and then just start moving into a little bit of motion. So some gentle rocking motion, some pelvic tilts in some different relationships to gravity. So we didn't move away from neutral alignment today. So you learned some basics about Pilates, some key terms like a domed foot and neutral alignment, and some rib cage breathing. And we practiced constructive rest position, and you had a chance to feel what it's like to have your pelvis organized to neutral in that relationship to gravity and connecting the rib cage breath to it. So I hope that you find this helpful. If you are brand new, then this is definitely the right 4-video sequence for you to start with. And if you're not brand new, it's still a really good refresher. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I just like to remind you that I'm also an intuitive eating coach. And intuitive eating is all about healing your relationship with food and your body. And mindfulness is, of course, not just about moving well, but it's also about eating well and having a relationship with food that's healthy and your body that's healthy. So if you would like to explore that in more detail, I offer a number of resources, both free and paid, and those are all in the description below this video. So I hope that helps you, and I will see you next week. Take care and bye for now.